watching East Tennessee's first and only year-round sports talk show on television. This is The Sports Source with your host, John Pennington.
Good Sunday morning and welcome into The Sports Source. We got a big show for you today. Should be much more active than yesterday or this previous weekend's NFL draft for folks around Tennessee at least. We got a lot of stuff to cover. Football, basketball, recruiting, the SEC, NFL, you name it. Let's just jump right into it. First segment brought to you by my friend Phil Cobble and Phil Cobble Fine Homes and Land. No realtor in Blount, Loudoun, or West Knox counties does a better job of publicizing your home for sale. Check out this one, for example. Fantastic home in the Powell area. Hey, Bob Hodge and I make for good neighbors. Move out there to God's country. 3,000 square feet, huge yard, private community, fenced-in backyard. Look at that price tag. Fantastic. Phil Cobble, Fine Homes and Land. Call him and his agents at that number, 675-7000, or you can find him at philcobblehomes.com. Now, I told you we got a lot of stuff coming up in today's show. Here's what we got. First of all, draft dodgers for the Volunteers, although they weren't the artful Dodgers yesterday. They didn't want to dodge it, but they got dodged. Butch Jones' inheritance. He didn't receive much from Derek Dooley, we now know, as if you needed a reminder of that. SEC by the numbers. Is anybody catching up to the SEC on the draft front, the talent front? What's on the horizon? We'll look ahead to the 2016 possible volunteer draft class, the seniors to be, and of course guys that may leave early possibly. Hoops commits. We'll have Mark Pankratz in here to talk about, we'll have a rapid fire session with him where we talk about the hoops commits to Tennessee and Rick Barnes. We'll talk about Billy Donovan leaving. We'll talk about Conzo Martin, who's gone on a recruiting tear at Cal. What's the difference between there and Tennessee? Nike news. Of course we got to do that. Every week somebody emails me, stop making fun of the Nike uniforms, which of course makes me make fun of the Nike uniform. And finally, the Tennessee Titans, their top 2 draft picks for those Titanic moves. You see we have a huge crowd today. Let's go ahead and introduce these guys. First, enjoying a delicious Mick Cafe, as I am. Has nothing to do with the sponsor, by the way. Bob Hodge, who's freelance contributor to the Knoxville News Sentinel. Josh Ward, glad to have him here. He's with WNML Sports Radio WNML. I have trouble flipping that thing. Of course, that's 99.1, and people can hear you Monday through Friday, noon to 3, with our friend Will West as well. Right there, we got Mike Strange, longtime contributor to the Knoxville News Sentinel. Far end from Southern Gulf Central and a longtime coverer of all things Vol, Chuck Cavaleris. Okay, fellows, for the first time since 1963, 51 years, Tennessee didn't have a player drafted. At the end of the NFL Network coverage, they said, well, now there are only 5 schools that have had people drafted over this long stretch. Tennessee no longer in that mix. To put it in perspective, Newberry and Mars Hill had players drafted, okay? In the state of Tennessee, Memphis, Chattanooga, congratulations to Bearden's Davis Tull, who got drafted by the Saints, and also Tennessee State all had players drafted. Granted, Tennessee would have probably had A.J. Johnson drafted if he hadn't taken his career off the roads, off the tracks. But when you look at this, how embarrassing is that? I mean, to not have anyone drafted? How embarrassing.
Can I start out and say not very embarrassing? And here's my reasoning. This is the product of the past. So I don't think it's all that embarrassing. Look at the way Tennessee's recruited the last 2 years. I just think that it's a blip. It's bad news for a day. But I also don't think it was all that shocking. I mean, if you follow the NFL, I don't think it was shocking that nobody got drafted from Tennessee.
It's perhaps a reminder of the embarrassing times of Tennessee football the last several years. If we did a list, it's probably near the bottom of everything that's gone on at Tennessee. Remember a year ago, Texas had its streak come to an end. University of Texas, so 2 UTs back to back. But it's a reminder of where things have been and everything that Tennessee's gone through since you go back to 2008 when there was that change and they struggled to rebuild from it.
I think around here, I think everybody knew what was coming. Or expected what was coming. I think around here, everybody understands. We've been showing it on the show, and we'll show it again today. This bar graph just keeps doing this. But I think outside is my question. How embarrassing is that for the Tennessee brand? I saw yesterday NFL Network coverage. They're talking about how many Louisville guys are getting drafted. And at one point, Mike Mayock kind of turns to Charles Davis and says, how many Tennessee guys? I think from a national perspective, people who aren't watching it as closely, they just see, wow, Tennessee didn't have anybody drafted. They really are on hard times. You guys thought, is it embarrassing at all or no?
A little bit, but it's not a lasting thing. It's for the last couple of years here, I think National Signing Day, the arrival of talent has far outweighed the draft day, the exodus of talent.
You agree?
Yeah, and I think the word to me is really disappointing. I mean, embarrassing. It's like Bob said, we saw this coming. It's not like I sat through 7 rounds of draft coverage waiting for Brian Randolph's name to be called, you know. So it was, but obviously it is very disappointing.
All right, I mentioned this. We do this every year. This is and I've got the chart here for you to see. It's the Vol draft trend in 4-year cycles. All right. Now, if you look at the stock market on a day-to-day basis, it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down, it's up and down. So you look at trend lines. What we do here, very simply, we look at a 4-year class. So you see it starting there with about 1990 to 93. And you see that Tennessee had 17 players drafted over those 4 years. Then you look at the guys drafted 91, 94, and you see it climb. I mean, once Philip Fulmer takes over there, I mean, it was high under Majors, but Philip Fulmer takes over. It goes to, you're talking Everest there. You're way up the top, 32 players drafted over a 4-year span. And then it just fell off a cliff. I mean, the talent cratered, and it was cratering long before Kiffin and Dooley. So you see this decline that had been coming there, and no one's been able to resurrect it. And now it was down to 8 players over the last 4 years, which, that is something that I think we spend 360 days a year forgetting, and then we bring it up here, and I'll get 5 days of email saying, oh, gosh, I forgot how bad that was.
Yeah, I think you look at 2011-12, that's where they really hit there. We've heard rock bottom used in Knoxville a lot the last several years. I think that's where it really hit that point. Look at the 2012 class. That was Cordero Patterson's class, the final Derek Dooley class before he was fired several months later. Cordero Patterson was an elite player, but he left after a year. I think there are 4 guys that you would look in that class that have turned into career-long players that you can count on, 4 in a class, and that's where Tennessee is at this point, looking at the 14 and 15 classes to dig them out of that.
And then something else that you don't hear now, there was a time when you would be watching an NFL game and you would hear, Tennessee's got the 2nd most players in the NFL of any college in the country. And I think at one time, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I probably am, I think it was 32 active players in the NFL. Almost an entire team.
Yep.
But now, I mean, obviously, you don't hear that anymore. And I challenge them, how many players does Tennessee have in the NFL right now?
Well, and the thing we've talked about before is even the guys that were in there the last couple of years are guys like Peyton Manning who have just had incredibly long careers.
Yes.
Right, Jason Witten.
Yes. I mean, you've got a lot of guys who left Tennessee during that upper echelon there on that graph. So to me, that sums up everything. Because when you talk about what happened here, it's talent. The bottom line is your talent base dried up. Now, that's not, I'm going to get the Fulmer lovers mad at me, that's not to say he didn't build it up. He did. But it started to fade under him, and then it's just gone down ever since. And to me, all the other stuff you've had going on, presidents changing, athletic directors, and all this other stuff, it's all secondary to the fact that you just haven't produced the same talent you did up until about 2000.
And then one more thing about Tennessee players in the NFL, you had a lot of guys make it in the NFL who didn't do all that great at Tennessee. And once again, names escape me.
Well, and Abreu Franklin has turned into a decent player who wasn't a household name.
And it goes back
Tennessee.
to, people can sit there and say, okay, was he being coached here? Was he not being coached? Which goes to the same thing. You didn't get the talent, but the talent you had, what did you do with it when it got on campus?
Yeah, and it's no wonder you've struggled to be a 500 team, either side of it. And you look at the players that other schools have been getting and how the borders were shut down, the coaching changes around the way, that you have to be able to change that and get Butch Jones credit for being able to do as well as he has.
Well, and that's what we'll talk about in the next segment, as a matter of fact, the inheritance that he received from Dooley and what he's done with it. Because I know there are people that why are we celebrating a 7-6 season? Take a look at that graph again. Take a look at the NFL draft. That's why you should be saying, okay, this guy knows what he's doing, or at least it seems like they're going in the right direction. And as Mike mentioned, the signing days have outweighed draft day blues over the last couple of years. Wanted to mention undrafted free agents. Tennessee did have 3 of them that we know of have signed. Matt Darr, punter to the Dolphins, Jordan Williams to the Jets, and Justin Coleman, defensive back. I'm surprised he didn't get drafted. He had a really good combine. Signed with the Minnesota Vikings, which makes Bob Hodge happy. When we come back.
And should make Justin Coleman very happy.
Should make him happy. I'm sure he'll be hating the Packers now, right along with you. When we come back, we'll talk about Butch Jones, Derek Dooley transition. How will this be used against Tennessee on the recruiting trail? Because you know it will. Come on back on the Sports Source.
Quality, quick. Trust Fast Frame.